Yes, so I get that this is the kind of thing we're trying to do. So I don't really have a question for now.
Okay. Is there any other person that has a question? Apart from that?
Yes, sir. I have just a question.
Okay.
So it's not regarding the unit test per se, but when I was trying to figure out my work on my own, I figured out that when I run the Docker compose, then copy the URL, it doesn't display on my browser. But when I use a test client, it works. So I don't know why that's.
Okay. Please give me a minute. Okay, so you said when you build this project, like this same project, it works when you test it, but when you try accessing it on your browser, it doesn't work.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, is it the same code or you made changes to it?
No, it's the same code. It's the same code.
Oh, that is surprising. That is surprising. Okay, do you know what?
But it works on text client too. Postmount on that client works perfectly well.
But when you run it on the browser, it doesn't work.
It's only when I run it on the browser that it doesn't work.
Okay. Let us try and replicate that. Okay, I'm starting the services now. Okay, so I'll copy this URL to my browser. That's this particular HTTP column 2/0.0.0.0, then port 8080. So I'll copy that to my browser. Like, do you see anything like this on the browser when you?
No, it shows error on my browser.
Okay, okay, please send me a screenshot of like what you have there. You can drop it on our chat and I'll look at it.
All right, sir.
Okay. Do you know what? So what was the name of the like who had the issue? Like who exactly had the issue?
I
The
think it's
name Joe, was
MG.
it you? Okay, MJ. Okay, do you know what?
MGS.
Okay, to save time. Like drop it for me. Okay, you can drop it on that group. Then we will look at it together. Should I say this one? Okay, we'll look at it together this one. Can you hear me?
All right, so
Yeah. So that we can go ahead with the class. Let's say by 7 o'clock on the dot. Maybe I'll drop the link, the Zoom link for you so that we can hop on the call. Look at the 6 All right, so we are going to continue from where we stopped. Now, before we do that, does any other person have an issue or a question with what we did in the last class?
It seems Yami dropped a message in the Python int group chat.
Okay. Okay, you hear me in this call, right? No. Okay, please verify that you have this ENV, like this ENV at your project root, and that let me put the error in, and that this Postgres user, the number one configuration here is there. All right. Just verify that you have this .env in your project root and they are populated like this. Okay, so is the issue gone? All right. So apart from Nikki and Yami, do we have any other questions or any other challenges? Okay, so I believe there are no further issues. We're going to proceed with our classes here. And if you have any issues with that, you can send me a message on Slack. I'll be happy to help out. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to push this.env to our GitHub repo. But this is not something. Is that really happening? No, it's not. It's not. So this is what you need to do. I didn't commit this.env file to the repository. So what you need to do is to before you even build the project, you should create a .env file at the root of this particular project. Then you create keys in there, like the Postgres user, the Postgres password, Postgres server, then a Postgres port, Postgres DB, and secret key and algorithm. So your Postgres user can be anything, the password can be anything, but your Postgres server should be DB. It should be exactly as I have here. Then your port should be 5432, just like I have here. And your DB can be anything. Then your secret key can be anything. But your algorithm should be this exactly as you have here, which is 256. So that'll be that. The next thing we're going to do is to build endpoints that will handle tweets, all right? Because that's what we're supposed to do in this class. And before we do that, let us look at the models and let's see what data we are supposed to capture in the tweet. So naturally, a tweet is supposed to have the user. That's the user that made this tweet. And a tweet is also supposed to have a content. Basically, the just the text that was tweeted. And in this project, we're not going to, let me see. Okay, we have a class for media, but we're not going to work with that now. We're just going to work with the plain text tweets. So what we're going to do is like create endpoints that will help us create these tweets, update these tweets, and delete these tweets. And when we're done with that, we're going to write unit tests for that. Right. So that's it. All right. So the endpoint that we are going to use to create these tweets, like what kind of HTTP verb should we use? Will it be a push request, a get request, or a put request? And anyone help me with that?
I think it should be post.
Yeah, perfect. To be a post. And you may be wondering why it will be a post, because you are basically posting something to the server. Just like you post a mail, we're posting something from the client to the server. So we are going to make use of a post request. To do that, we're going to decorate the endpoint router the post, and I want it to post to create tweet. Then I want the status code to I want our status code to be 201. So status code will be status dot HTTP. So create it, and we mostly make use of this code when you are when you are creating something on the server. You can choose to return to 1 instead of 200. Then what else do we need? We need there should be a response model. And for now, I'm going to use good. Then we are going to need a response description. And this response description, I think this is the first time we're going to use it. It's mostly used to just provide a description of the endpoint. And this is just useful for the documentation. We are going to look at it later. Here's what I mean. It's a tweet. Then I believe that's all. So we are going to create the function that will be executed when a request comes to this endpoint. And I want this function to be called create. Then for now, I don't want to do anything. I just want to fast that endpoint. So let me split my screen into two and bring on this. All right, so I'm going to start this server and let us look at the docs. You know, see what this response description really does. Okay, let me switch my screen to the web browser. Right, so this is what we have. Now, if we go to the documentation, /doc, we are going to see a list of all the endpoints we currently have. And this one is new, content/create, and this is the description that we specified there. All right. So it's sorry, give me a minute. Okay, so like I was saying, this text here is basically a description of the endpoint. Like let's say you want to like pass information across to the front end developer working with your endpoint, and instead of including something like this, like port register, verify, upload, you can you can include a real message, a real description for the dev to really know what this particular endpoint is all about. So that's that. The next thing we are going to do is to actually go ahead and build the code that actually receives the contents and convert them to tweets. To do that, like we've been doing earlier, we are going to define the data schema. What I mean by that is we are just going to specify the structure of the data that we want to receive into our endpoint. So to do that, we'll go to libraries.schemas, then I'll create a new file for content. I'll call this content.file. Oops, sorry about that. This is content.file. Content.file. Then within content.file, we are going to import base model from file. With that, we are going to create a class, and I'll call this class tweet script, and it's going to inherit from base model. And this particular class will be responsible for creation of tweets. I don't need this, so I'll take it off. Now, looking at the models, we are going to need a couple of things from here. We're going to need a couple of things from here when creating tweets. We will need let's go to content. Yeah, we need the content, and this content will be of type string, and it will be equal to a field that is compulsory and should have a max length of the max length in our DB is 600 characters. So I want to specify max length of 550. Okay. Then what else do we need? That should be all. Yeah, that should be all. Content, user content. That should be all. So we're going to come here and import that class. So from library dot schemas content import create tweets. Then we are going to decorate this endpoint. We are going to specify that this endpoint should receive data that is of type tweet create. What that means is that any JSON request coming to the endpoint should have a content field. All right, that's all we need. Then this content field should be of type string and shouldn't pass and the length shouldn't pass 550 characters. Now the next thing we need is normally take Twitter for example. When you're on Twitter, you have to log in before you are able to create tweets, right? So we want the same thing here, right? I don't want it to be possible for a user to just anonymously drop a tweet on a server. The user has to be authenticated. So to do that, we are going to follow the same method we used in I think 2 classes ago when we were working on the update endpoint. So we're going to make use of this dependency called getCurrentUser, and we also import security from FastAPI. Yeah, from FastAPI. So we import getCurrentUser, and we are also going to import security from FastAPI. Then we will define that. Okay, before I do that, let me do it this way first to show you something. Current user is equal to current user is equal to security, and its current user, which takes the scope of just this. All right, so we have an error. Can anyone tell me why we have this error? No. It's the same thing we did for this endpoint. We have a data field, then we have this dependency, this getCurrentUser dependency, but it worked there. Why is it not working here? Uche, go first.
Okay, I'm not too sure. I'm still trying to. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello? I am not too sure. Let me see. You said why it's working?
Yeah. It's
Let me see.
if you look at the endpoint by the right of my screen, this update endpoint we used to update user data. All right, we have this we have the endpoint data, then we have this dependency here. And why is it that it's not working here? We have this error here. Why is it so? Wait, they're the same.
I don't know. I don't really know.
Okay. Mike, try it out.
I think the data and the data tweet create should come before the current user.
Guess what? Why is that so? Yeah, you're right. It should come before the current user. Okay, so if we copy this data to the top, you can observe that that error is gone. And the reason why it is so is that in Python, your positional argument should always be before. You should always have the positional argument before the keyword argument. Right? I believe you're not new to positional and keyword arguments. Take for example, if you have a function, like, let's call this test func, and text func takes two arguments. We have x and y, right? So let's say we have something like this: y is equal to maybe 6. That is like a positional, and that is like a keyword argument, right? And while this first one that doesn't have anything attached to it is like a positional argument. So the positional argument should always be before the keyword argument, right? If you should use the keyword argument first, yeah, you should use the keyword argument first before the positional argument. You are going to have an error. So that's basically what happened here. Right. So now that the error is gone, what we're going to do now is to build the logic that will populate the database with our tweet. Right, to do that, we're first going to import the tweet model from contents. There will be some models.content, import tweet. Then we're also going to import media from there. Yeah. So the very first thing we're going to do is to we simply need to do await tweet dot create and think like you saw those classes ago. Those were each model comes with a create keyword, like a create method that you can use to create a record in the DB and then return the object. Right. So for the model tweets, we use this method create to just pass in the data you want to populate. You want to save the database. So in this case, we want to save this content the user submitted. All right, so you could do something like await tweet.create content it's equal to data content. Then don't forget that each tweet should have a user, like we've seen here at line 9 of this content.py. Each tweet should have a user, so you should specify the user as user is equal to current user. Right. Another thing you could do is say user ID is equal to current user ID, and it will still work. Right, to still work. But to avoid confusion, I'll remove that ID. So with this, we've created it. Right, when the client sends this request to the backend, it will populate the database and then return a response. Do you have a question on this? Do we have a question on that?
Not really any question.
No question. So now the next thing we're going to do is to change this response model. Right, I don't want to return a bool, and I want to return actual data to the client when the client creates a tweet. So to do that, we are going to create another data structure and we'll call this tweet public. And this tweet public will basically define the data that we want to return to the client. Right. The data we want to return to the client. So to do that, I want to, as usual, inherit from base model because it is a pedantic model. Then what data do we want to return to the client? I want to return the content, which should be of type string. Then I also want to return something else. Let's inspect our models first. So I also want to return the ID, the created at which captures the date time that this tweet was created, and also the updated at which captures the date time at which this tweet was updated. So I need this data as well. ID. Our ID should be of the UUID, not string. So this what I mean. UUID. So to get this UUID, you need to import it from EUID. So from EUID, import EUID. Then we need to create that as well. And create that will be of type datetime. For us to make use of datetime, we should import that as well. So import datetime from datetime. And updated that as well will be of type datetime. Updated. All right. So we are going to import this to our router file alongside with create. Then I want that to be the response model. Now, when you create, when you call create on a model, it returns an instance of that database object. Say we create a tweet of type data.content, okay, of content, data.content, and of user, current user. Right. After the creation is complete, it returns a copy of that database object to you. So we want to store this returned value in a different variable, and I want to call this variable tweet, which is equal to this. So this is the variable that I want to return to the client. Return tweet. That's what I want to return to the client. So what fast API will do under the hood will be, it will take that database object, that async object, then it will, like perform some magic at the back end and then convert it to the Pydantic object and return that to the client. So please, do we have any question on this?
No question. No. You said when we create, so when we, all this now is under the post request. So we create a, when we make a request on the post endpoint, then we type our tweet, it saves this under this tweet, this line 22, this content and user, is defined in the schemas, right? Or in the database, this content and user.
If you look at our database model, that's treated with models of content. You see this tweets model on line 6. Then on line 9, we define the user, which is like the owner of the tweets. All right, and it is linked to our user model. Then we have a content field which captures the text of the tweet.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are defined in the model as well. Okay, so do we have any other question?
Okay, that what you created now in the schema, is this schemas table where you created the UID and the created that and data? How does it apply here, or is it for the get request?
Okay, sorry, I didn't get you. Please, can you come again?
Okay, before here now, you just created in the, I think it's in the schemas table. I've forgotten the name where you created.
Yes,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay, so what was your question on that?
Does this one you created now, is it for the, because I don't see where you linked tweet public in that post request, or is it for the get request or something?
I did that. Can you see this response model?
Okay, I'm seeing it now.
Tweet public. Okay. Yeah, that defines the kind of data we want to send back to the clients. We want the final display, the returned response to include contents, to include not just the content, but the ID of the tweet as well, the time it was created and the time that it was updated, as if it is updated. The time should be there
Okay.
too. I think this should be optional. Will you try now? Well, to be safe, I'll make this optional. So this is another way to make a shield optional in Pydantic. And it only works for Python version 3.10 and above. So if your Python version is below the, okay, already you are using Docker. So the Python version installed in this Docker environment is, I think, 3.10.2. But let me confirm. Yeah, if we go to a Docker file, you see here from at line 1, from Python 3.10.1. So that's the Python version we're using. It will work, definitely. So this basically tells us that updated that can be none, it can be data. You know, we do that instead of this is what I mean, instead of using this from typing import optional. So instead of something like optional, instead of something like this, optional data, which makes this data optional, you can just use this date time or none. This thing you're seeing here, this vertical slash is it's like O in Python. Please, do we have any question on this before we move to tweet update and today?
Okay. The idea of making that updated at optional, is it like maybe when someone creates an account first or creates a tweet, so that tweet only has a creation date, it doesn't have like an updating date? Maybe the updated that is for if you make a post and maybe get request or something. How does it, because I know we set the updated that and created that are created automatically. It's not like the user inputs them.
Yeah. So this updated is you can see it is a date time field that has auto nouns equal to true, which means whenever this field is updated, it should be populated. But I am not sure. I am not sure if this field is populated upon create. What I mean is when we create a tweet, I'm not sure if this field is populated, but we will see when we are testing this. All right.
Okay.
So
All right.
just to be safe, or I'm just being safe. You know, that's why I'm including this or none here, so that if in the case that this field is not populated on create, we don't have an error. That's the
Okay.
reason for this. But if upon testing we see that it is automatically created when this when the tweet is created, then there will be no need for this. All right, I'll take it off. Now, there's one change I want to make. Most of our the data you want to return, right, we want to include this ID created as an updated. So I don't want a situation in which maybe we have an endpoint that returns something else. Take for example, images. When we are creating image public, we also copy and paste this. Let's copy and paste ID created at an updated. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to abstract this to a different model. Right. Then this tweet public is going to inherit from that model. And any other Pydantic class that needs this ID created at an updated will also inherit from that model. So this is how we are going to do it. I'll create a shared file. I'll call it shared file. Then within this file, we're going to import Pydantic. We're going to import base model from Pydantic. Then I'll create a class called base model. Okay, I'll create a class called shade model. Shade model, which will be of type, which will inherit from base model. Then this is the model that will have all of this. Yeah, that's the model that will have all of that. Then to use this model in content, we're going to import it. You import that from library.schemas.shade, import shade model. Then we simply inherit our tweet public from that shade model, and it will automatically get the properties of that shade model, which is the ID the created at and the updated at. Please, do you have a question on this?
Okay, what do you say is the reason for creating that shared file?
Okay, what I mean is, take for example, when we are working on these images, when we are working on an endpoint that will return this like that return these comments, that return this media, right? You know, this comment also has an ID. It has a created at, it has an updated at, and field. So I need to return this field as well. I need to return this field as well to the client. So I didn't want a situation in which, take for example, I have something like this. I have, let's say, tweet public 2, and it has all these fields. Oops. Yeah, it has all these fields. Then when I'm creating a model for tweets, then when I'm creating a model for likes, I'll then maybe, what do you have in likes? Okay, likes has tweets ID, which is of WID. Then it has the user ID, which is of WID. So if you look at this, we are repeating ID created and data for tweets. Then we are also repeating it here in likes, and we also repeat for comments and media. So it doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, you know, in Python we have this dry principle. You shouldn't really repeat yourself. If you find yourself repeating yourself too much, and not just Python, in software development as well, like not just Python, JavaScript, any programming language, you shouldn't over repeat yourself when it is unnecessary. So we are repeating here, which is not right. Instead, we can just abstract this to a different class. Then like call that class anything. Then we will import that class. Like we'll inherit from that class. All right, it's much cleaner that way. Of course, this would not be shared model. This would be base model. Yeah, this will be base model, not shared model. All right, so that's my reasoning for keeping that away. So that's it. Do you have any other question apart from
No question for now.
okay. All right. So the next thing we are going to do is okay, I'll quickly create an endpoint that we'll use to update a tweet and also delete the tweets. Then when I'm done with that, we are going to write the test for this endpoint. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll create this, and whenever you're updating, you should always use a push request. So I'll change the endpoints to update tweet. Oops, I forgot something. You should have a name. And then tweets. You should have a name here. Tweets update. And the status code should be 200. Then let's change the description to updated tweet. There will be executed when you have a request going to this particular endpoint. And I'll call this function update tweet. Now let's define the data we want to basically we want to just capture the same data that we take in, right, when we are creating tweets. We are taking the content, so that's just it. But I don't want to use this tweet create schema because I want that difference to be there. We should have a separate schema for tweet create. Then there should be another one for tweet update. Then I'll call this tweet update. Then instead of just doing this, instead of doing this, we are just repeating ourselves for no good reason. I can just, we can just inherit from tweet code. Alright, we can just inherit from tweet code, and that would work. Wait, I hope you understand what I'm doing here.
Yes, I understand why you inherited from there.
Yes. So when we inherit tweet creating tweet update will automatically have all the properties of tweet create, which includes this content here. So now we're going to make use of this tweet update in the update endpoint. So instead of tweet create here, we will use tweet update. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to actually update the data. We need to actually update the data. And to do that, so actually, we can have a whole lot of tweets in our database. So how do we identify the specific tweet that we are looking for? Right, that's a good question. We could be having millions of tweets in the database, and we want to update a tweet. How do we know the tweet the user wants to update? Right, so how do we do that?
Okay, I'm not sure, but I believe we will need.
No, don't talk. You are the one that has been talking. Mike. Sorry, you're the one that has been talking. We need someone else to say something.
Yeah.
So Mike. MJ and Hammer.
I feel like maybe each user should have like a specific UID. We can like find specific tweets by that UID. I don't know.
Okay.
So sorry, sir. I mean, I'm not in a very comfortable place. What's the question again?
Okay. So, the question is, we're talking about tweet updates, right? But there will be millions of tweets in the database. So how do you know the exact tweets that we want to update? Yeah, how do we get that tweets that we want to update?
Okay, I think all the models have a UUID, so and they're all unique. I think we can use that to get a particular UID that is attached to or linked to a particular user.
Yeah. Yes. That's what we need to do. We need to like when we want to update a tweet, we should send a request to an endpoint that that also receives the UID. That's the Twitter ID. This is what I mean. This particular update tweet endpoint should also get the tweet ID. Then we will receive the tweet ID here. And this tweet ID will be of that string and it will be equal to the path. What this means is that we are just telling Fast API to extract, to look at the path and extract this tweet ID. And these three dots specifies that this is compulsory. If this tweet ID is not provided, we want an error to be returned. So to make use of path, we have to import it from Fast API. With this, we can extract a tweet that has a particular ID. So you do that with await tweet.get, then it has an ID of tweet ID. And when you get, you pass an update flag. Right, you call an update method to just update it. And to update it, we just want to update data.dicts, then to be saved. I'll include an exclude on set flag, and we are going to set that to true. So with that, we will be able to basically update it. Now, I just don't want to update a tweet. I want to return the updated tweet as well. So we are going to return that same object. Await tweet.get ID is equal to tweet ID. This will send back the updated copy of the statement. So any question on this?
Okay, instead of returning await the whole thing, what if we just stored it in a variable, then return that variable? Is it the same thing? This whole tweet from line 41 and 42, if you just put it in a variable.
Even something like this, then return tweet. Even this.
Yeah, exactly.
No, unfortunately, it will not work because update. This update method does not return a copy of the database object like create does.
Okay.
Right. So whenever you call update, it doesn't. That's what I observed. So unfortunately, you need to like manually extract and return like this.
Okay, no other question.
Okay. The next thing we're going to do is to we're going to create a delete endpoint because we should be able to delete a tweet as well. So to do that, we'll do a little bit of copy and pasting. Call this endpoint, delete endpoint, delete tweet. Then you should accept the delete request. Delete. And then it should return it shouldn't return any response. Then the status code should be okay. Now let us change this description to deleted it. And this is the function that we executed. We are not taking any data, so I'll rename this function to delete it. Good. So this is quite simple. This is quite simple. What we are going to use, we are going to get a tweet. Wait, tweet dot get. Then we get a tweet with an ID of tweet ID. Then we call delete on it, and that'll be that. But there's a problem with it. What's the problem?
Let me see. It's current user. Okay. Wait. I can't think of. Is it that we should return their weight or? Yeah.
No, like the code would work, like perfectly.
Yeah,
It works,
okay.
it works. Now we send a request to this endpoint to the tweet ID, it will actually delete the tweet, right? But there's a problem with it.
Okay. Okay, I can't think of this one here.
Okay. Iham and MJ, anything that's going on MJ.
I don't know. Get current user. I don't think it should be there.
Yeah, it should be there because we want this endpoint to authenticate it. The user shouldn't interact with this endpoint without having an account
Okay.
authenticating the request. Okay. The issue is that, take for example, what if you were able to delete tweets that are not yours on Twitter? How do you feel about that? Or maybe someone had the capability to, you post a tweet, your own tweet, you're the one that posted it down. Someone else can delete it. How would you feel about that?
Okay, so come again. I didn't hear you well.
What I mean is, take Twitter for example. You create a tweet on your account, then maybe another user came and deleted the tweets. Right? How would you think about that?
Okay, you say if another user deleted his own tweet.
Like your own tweet, the tweet you created, like your tweet, someone else can delete the tweet. How do you feel about it?
Okay, I thought that's the use of this authentication to make sure that someone else doesn't delete your tweet or something.
No.
This.
That get current user just ensures that any user that is interacting with this endpoint is authenticated. All right. So we may have 100 users and they are all authenticated. And because they are all authenticated doesn't mean that I should be able to delete your tweet or MJ should be able to delete his tweet and all of that. It will be a security risk for this to happen.
Okay,
It will be a security risk. That's it. The thing is that here we have not implemented a check that should ensure that user A cannot delete a tweet that does not belong to user A. And user B should only be able to delete a tweet that belongs to him. All right.
Yeah.
So that is a huge security risk. Take for example, look at this update. At this point we have not implemented any check to ensure that No one can update a tweet that doesn't belong to him. Take for example, if Twitter was like this, I would be able to maybe check if Buhari should post something that should be, I would have been able to like go there and then edit the post to something else, which wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. So what we're going to do is to implement these checks that will just check if the user that wants to perform this operation has the right permissions to perform this operation. All right, that is what we need to do. So to do that, I'm going to, since we need that logic, update to it and delete it. I don't want to repeat myself, so I'll create a dependency that we are going to insert into this. We are going to insert into any endpoint we want that feature to be available. Then we'll do that. So if we come to library of dependencies, we are going to create a file, and I'll call this file to the file. And within this file, we'll create this permissions logic, the logic one for all of these permissions. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to import part from fast API. So from fast API import part, then we are going to make depends. I think, yeah, we are going to do security as well. Then from library dot dependencies, library dot dependencies dot what we want to import get current user. So what we're going to do now is to create a function that will handle that. So I'll create the first function, the sync function that will be called get tweet by ID from path. And
Sorry, I didn't catch that. I don't know, your audio went off.
please give me a minute.
For real, when I went to
Can you not hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so we want to create this function that will be responsible for extracting tweets by ID from the path. Right. So to do that, we simply define this tweet ID, which is a string that is extracted from the path. Then we return await. Let me import the tweet model. All right, so we simply extract and return the tweet. So return await tweet get ID is equal to tweet ID. Right. Now we are going to create another dependency that will actually check if the user making this request is the user that is supposed to make that request. So let us create another function called check tweet permissions. And this particular function will depend on this function. This particular function will depend on this function, this get tweet by ID from part function. So all these tweets is equal to depends get tweet by ID. But then it also depends on get current user, right? So we're going to copy this code from here down here. Now all we're going to do is to get these tweets, get the ID of the user that has these tweets, and then compare with the ID of this particular user, right? And if they don't match, we raise an exception. So to raise an exception, of course, we need to import HTTP exception. So to check if tweet user ID is not equal to current user ID, we want to raise an exception. Raise an exception with the status code of let's import status code of status the HTTP. I want it to be 401, meaning unauthorized. Then it also return detail of you are not authorized to perform this action. Right, so with this, we can import this check tweets permissions to our routers module, then make the dependency for update tweet and delete tweet. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to import depends at from fast API. Then we'll import that dependency from library dependencies tweet. Oops, no, this should be contents, not tweets. Let me change this to contents. Contents.py. So from library for dependencies or contents, import check tweet permissions. So we'll make that a dependency for the tweet update and tweet delete endpoint. Dependencies. Check tweet permissions. So with this, a user that is not the owner of a tweet can update or delete a tweet. And if the user tries to do that, we should have this exception raised. We should have an exception with a status code of 401 and this detail of you are not authorized to perform this action. All right, so that's the same question on this.
That's independent. It did work for every user.
Yes, yes, it works for every user.
Okay.
Right? So if the user is if the user making this request is not the owner of the if it's not the owner of the tweet, that's what we check at line 16. All right, we get the tweet, then we look at the user ID. So when you look at these tweets, we have fields for user identity for content. We actually don't have any field like user in the database. All we have in the database is this user ID, which defines that this is a one-to-many relationship object. All right, so we pick that user ID, which like stores the ID of the user that owns this particular tweet. Then we also pick the ID of this user making this request, and then we compare them. Now, if they are not the same, right? That's the meaning of this exclamation and equal to. It, it's not equal to, it means not equal to. We check that if they are not equal, we then raise the exception with the status code and this data. And of course, since this is a dependency, it has access to these path parameters. Right, I think we discussed this in the dependencies class a couple of weeks back. So it has access to this path parameter, which is called to ID. Is any question on that?
Yeah, no question for me.
MJ and Emma, is any question?
No question again.
Emma, you're cool, right?
Yeah, may said his battery is low, so it's probably not.
Was it Emma? I thought it was Mark. It was Mike that had a low battery.
Yeah, it's my turn.
Okay. Sorry. So the next thing I'm going to do is to test this. The next thing I'm going to do is to test this. So let's go to the new test. Okay, in the last class, I asked you guys to complete the rest of, like, to complete this test. So were you able to do it? Did you have any issue on that?
Okay, I'm still working on it. I'm trying to. I know you told us to like create tests for other endpoints, but I've not got around to do that yet. So still working on that.
Okay. So let us create a different test file for tweets. Test tweets.py. And see there's some things you need to import. Things like okay, we need Redis, right? We need PyTest, we need fast API, then we need a simple performance. So import those. Then we need to define this PyTest mark so that PyTest will be able to execute our sync test. Then there's this fake test I always like to include in. Just want to show that my tests are running. So let's test this. Okay, the first test set test set so first. So the next test we're going to create is a test for tweet creation. To do that, we are going to create a new class for that. Then we'll define the function that makes this tweet. So I'll create a class for test tweets create. Then this class will have a method. This class will have a method that's called this. We'll call it test create. Then it will take a couple of arguments like self, up. Then it will also take client. It will also take clients. Then all right. All right. The next thing we're going to do is to authenticate that client. At the moment, the client is not authenticated, so this thing will not work. The client that is unauthenticated will not be able to interact with an authenticated endpoint. So we need to authenticate the client, and to save time, I will do a little bit of copy and pasting there. Within a minute. Right. So we are going to create a new fixture that will be called authorized client. And what this means is that this is a client that is just authorized. We've created the token and everything. And we will always attach that token to the client header, the request header. That's right. The code is authorized client. Then need to take the test user. That is this test user we created here at line 81. Then it's this. Already text in the test user. Now we need to create an access token. We need to create an access token for this client. To do that, let's go to login. Then at login, we'll copy the creation code we have there. Login. Okay, so this is it. This is what we need. Also need we're going to import so we're going to import JWT schema. We're going to import test user. Test user. We're going to import date time in token prefix. So let's import date time from date time import date time unique time zone. Then we also need time delta. What else we need? We need JWT, so we import that from JC. From JC import JWT. Then we need JWT schema. So we are going to import that from library of schemas of what? Import JWT schema. I think we also need secret key and JWT token prefix from config. Bring this from config. Secret key and algorithm from config. Then as for this prefix, it is always bearer. So I'll change this to bearer. So hang on a minute. Bearer, and we are going to attach the encoded JWT. All right. So with this, we have an authorized client. Please, do you have any question on this? Is there anything you don't understand? We are basically recreating what we did at login. We simply prepare the JWT schema. What I mean is the data we want to include into JWT. Then we append the expiry date to that data. Then we encode that data at line 119 with JWT.encode. To encode is the data you want to encode. Then JWT.encode takes a secret key and takes an algorithm. So we include that. Now when we have a JSON token, we attach this token to the header. Right. We attach this token to the header with the key of authorization and pass in the bearer, then space, then your token. When we're done with that, we simply return the client. Is there any question on this?
Okay, no question from me.
All right. So the next thing we're going to do is to make use of this in the tests instead of the regular clients. We want to make use of what I mean is instead of these clients, just a regular clients, you want to make use of the authorized clients instead. All right, so requests coming from this authorized clients will be authenticated so that we will not have issues with authentication. So the first thing to do is to prepare the data, the tweet creation data, and if you look at the content schema, tweet create takes only a content field. So I'm going to collect that. My very first tweet. That will be the kata. Then the rest of it will be similar to what we had earlier. Simply define a response variable that is equal to await clients to a post, and in this case we're using authorized client. So we change that client to authorized client. Then we send a push request to, while we're sending this push request to, come to the endpoint that we're working with, which is tweet crate. Then we copy the name of that endpoint. Simply copy it here. Now what do you want to send? All right. That will be JSON equal to data. That's what we're sending. Now, let me reduce this backend response to let me change it to race. So now we want to asset that race.status code is equal to 2. Let me use this instead. We want to asset that race.status code is the same thing as the status code we are supposed to return if this request is successful. That's the first thing. Now let's run the test and see if that is true. Good. Our test has passed. That means there's nothing really wrong with our endpoint, with our creating point. It works perfectly. But this is a very wrong test. It's not a proper test because you shouldn't just check if your response returned, if the status code you got back is what you're expecting to get back. You should check other things as well. So we are going to check the response data. And you get the response data with your response object.json, called JSON on it. It will give you the response data the endpoints yielded, right, in JSON format. So the first thing we're going to check is we want to ensure that this response data is on. So asset that this data is not known. Then we also want to check that don't forget that this response that was returned should contain an ID. It should contain content field. It should contain created at and updated at. So we want to check if this are included as well. So assets that ID is available in race data. Then we also want to asset that content is available there. Content is available there. We want to also asset that created that is available and updated at is also available. Then another thing I want to check is that I want to show that the content that is returned is the same thing that I sent in, that it is not something else. So with that, I'll asset that race data will take the content is equal to data content. Right. So let us run this into what happens. Yeah, it has passed. So our response is returning what we expected to return. Now, the next thing I would love to check is I want to be sure that um, we have that item in the database. That's what I want to be sure of. Have that in the database. So I'll say that tweet is equal to um, tweet is equal to tweet dot get or no. So actually on that we need to import it from models. From models of content import it. So this get unknown is one of the methods that comes with data sharing models. The normal one we're used to is simply tweet.get, all right? So if tweet.get is unable to, like if model.get is unable to get the item you specified with that parameters, it's going to return a 404 error. And I don't want to get a 404 error. Right? So instead, I want to use get unknown, which will return known if that item is unavailable. So that's what I need. And I want to get the tweet of ID race that ID. Now I want to assert that this item is not. Okay, let me change it to tweets. So I want to assert that this tweet is not known. Then I want to assert that tweet the content is equal to data content. So let's run that, see what happens. Good. So our test has passed. That goes on to tell us that we wrote a proper code for the great tweet. Please, do you have any question on this? Is there anything you don't understand? Yeah.
Yes, sir, I understand. I'm just trying to think of like maybe a scenario where it fails. Let's say what would mean, for example,
Sorry, I can't hear you. Teacher, I can't
okay,
hear you.
yeah, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I understand what you have done so far. I'm just trying to think of like maybe what scenario could make maybe this test to fail. For example, now that I said line 44 now, I'm trying to think maybe what could make the rest data not be equal to the data or something. I'm just trying to think of the scenarios, but I understand the just the logic and what you have done so far. So
Okay, so the purpose of unit test is just to like give like check your code, basically check that what you wrote is it's standard, it's okay, that you don't have a fault. It is entirely possible that maybe the user, the developer building this, maybe this tweet public, he failed to include this. He failed to include this. All right. He only he only inherited from shared model and forgot to include that. And forgot to include a field for content. right? So in this case, the content will not be returned. All right, like after creating the tweet will be created no doubt, but in the return object, the content may not be there. So let's run this test and see what happens in that case. Yeah, you consider we now have an error, right? A session error. Accept that contents of this field, this key called content is available in this response and it is not, right? So this is one of the things that could go wrong if you didn't write a test, right? This is a very common mistake. This is a very common mistake. We maybe if it was an endpoint that handled a whole lot of data. Okay, so someone that is rushing, you could forget that. Oh, you could forget that you're supposed to include contents in the fields that you return to the client. So having a test like this, helps you catch these errors. Another thing that could go wrong is maybe um, which other thing will go wrong? This endpoint is very simple, so nothing much may go wrong. But let's say maybe during the refactoring, someone mistakenly maybe deletes this tweet, deletes this line, maybe thinking that the line is not useful. All right. Running this test could help you catch this error. And something could go wrong if, let's say, there's an upgrade on Tortoise ORM. Let's say there's an upgrade on Tortoise ORM. And let's just say, for example, this crate is no longer available. We're using something else to create an object. All right, if you didn't have this in test in place, after running the update and you push this to production, you end up having errors. But if you have this test in place, you can easily run the test and the error will be spotted and you can work on the fix. So that's it. So unfortunately, we don't have the time to write the test for all the endpoints. We've written tests for increase, but we have not written the test for updates. We have not written the test for deletes. Okay, so I'll love you to go and do that. But you should try and do that. Maybe your next assignment will be, I'll ask you to work on this project, maybe to build a new feature on this project, or maybe write a test for something, or write a test for anything. So please, in your spare time, you should go and write a test for this. Right, specifically for delete. And you may be wondering how we attach this ID to the request, right? You may be wondering that. So let me point that out real quick. So
Yeah, I
let's
was
say,
actually wondering that.
yeah. Let's say we wanted to send this request to tweet delete. All right, it will be something like this, right? Tweet delete. So to attach this part parameter to the request, you simply add a command here, then you input the part parameter there is equal to just anything you want to include there. So that's how you include this part parameter. I hope you understand.
Yes.
Okay. So this is all right. So with this, you are done for the class. Let me push this to the repo so that you can reference it. So as you have observed, since we have not tested delete tweets, update tweets, and create tweets, okay, we've not tested update and delete tweets. There could be errors here. All right. So when you run the test, if you see that there's any bug in the code, you should create a pull request. I believe you like just search online how to create a pull request on GitHub. What I mean there is that you simply create a new branch. For example, git checkout and B for a new branch fix. This will switch you to a new branch. Then you make changes to the code, commit the changes, and then push it to this class repository. Then when you do that, you can then go in there and create a pull request. From there, I'll be notified, then I can check and review and merge if it's open. So that will be that for today's class. Thanks a lot for attending. Then
Thank
in
you
the
very much.
next class, we'll be working on likes and follows. Thanks for
Sorry,
attending.
you say we'll be working on what?
Like
Likes.
how you can like
Okay,
it with,
okay, likes. Okay, okay.
like on like. So that's what we'll be working on. All right. So this video will be uploaded later in the day, so I can reference it in your free time.
Oh, thank you, sir.
All right, sir.
So, please, don't forget. Remember, I've not gotten any response.
Okay. On the